This video looks at how we might use the learning tool of story structure and how, by shaping our teaching in story form, we may most effectively teach our subject matter. Kieran, how does this work?
Well, think of all cultures use stories. The story is one of the most culturally universal forms of language, and everybody uses it for much the same purposes. Think of the newspaper editor who says to the journalist, hey, go and find out what's the story on the bridge collapse. The editor isn't asking for a fiction about what happened, but asking the journalist to find out what were the facts, expose them as clearly as possible, but even more important, to bring them out in a way that is emotionally engaging for the reader. Everything that we have in the curriculum, similarly, has a story attached to it. So what I'm suggesting here is that we should be much more alert to using the story structure in building our lessons and units than typically we are in education. How
would a teacher go about planning in terms of a story structure?
Well, the most significant difference would be between the present way in which most teacher education programs, for example, teach planning, which is to start with the objectives. In this case, what we do is start by asking, what's the story on? What's the story on earthworms? What's the story on place value? What's the story on whatever the element of the curriculum that we're teaching might be? And I think that use of that idea of what's the story brings out its emotional importance, which we tend to ignore a little bit if we focus on objectives. We then focus on concepts and content, and we don't bring out the emotional and the imaginative engagement that's a part of everything in the curriculum if we teach it properly.
Maybe you could give us an example using place value, how we might teach that topic using a story structure.
You could, in this case, maybe invent a light fiction about a king who wants to count his army, in which case the king has 6 counselors, say, and 5 of the counselors are fairly clueless, coming up with ideas of how to count the army that don't work very well. But he has one clever counselor, and the clever counselor says, hey king, get each of the clueless counselors to pick up 10 stones each, so they get these pebbles, and then they have some tables, a big table in front of them, and in front of each counselor then is put a bowl. And the counselor at the end simply watches the soldiers going off back to the barracks as they finish their maneuvering. And for each soldier who goes by, he puts a stone in his bowl. So he has a very exciting afternoon. And then when the 10 stones are down, he picks them up again, but just keeps doing this for each soldier going by. And then the counselor to his left, who for gender equity purposes should be she, simply has to watch him. And each time he picks his 10 stones up, she puts one down. So she has a rather duller afternoon, simply watching him. And then when her 10 stones are down, she picks them up and then puts a stone down again for each time he picks his 10 up. And each time she picks her 10 up, the counselor to her left puts one down in his bowl. And then the same goes on to the end. So at the end of the afternoon, we've got 1, 3, 0, 8, 5 stones in the bowl, so we know there are 13,085 soldiers in the army. And 2 or 3 things tend to happen when you teach this way. One, you can elaborate by getting the students to count each other, count other things using this model, change the base from 10. The other thing that tends to happen is that they learn the algorithm more readily. It's easier to learn. And the more important thing, I think, that happens is that they form an emotional association with the cleverness of the clever counselor, so that they begin to see themselves as mathematical animals who have this ingenuity that is a part of what they can do with numbers. And I think using stories like this engages the imagination much more powerfully in what we're teaching and gives the kids a sense of the wonder of the world in the process.
Perhaps we could look at another example from someone using this in their classroom.
Yes, well, we could ask Tanis Calder, who's been using this in her teaching for a number of years.
Well, one of my favorite ways of using story is when I teach math. And one story sort of way of teaching exponential numbers was extremely interesting for the kids. A lot of times when kids are learning about exponential numbers and how things can grow exponentially, they have a very hard time grasping exactly how quickly things can grow. And so what I'll do often is I'll come to the class and I'll announce to them, I've got this wonderful way for you guys to make money, and I create a story for them to sort of become part of. And of course they get all very interested, and everyone wants to make money. And so they say, great, great, how am I going to make so much money? And I said, it's wonderful. All you have to do is go home, tell your parents that you'll do a chore, you can vacuum the living room or do the dishes or whatever, and all they have to do is pay you 1 penny and it'll make you incredibly rich. And of course they think, of course this is ridiculous. This is not going to make them a lot of money. And I said, but no, 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 no. The thing is, today you get paid 1 penny and tomorrow you get paid 2 pennies. And they look at you again thinking, well, no, this is still not going to make you rich. And I said, but on the next day, of course, you make double what you made the day before, and so it's 4 pennies. And so they're still very unconvinced and think that, you know, this is a ridiculous way to make money and it's not going to get you anywhere. And it'll take them years and years and years before they make any kind of money at all. And I say to them, no, no, but it's really true. You'll be rich in no time. And so then we sit together as a class and we try to work out, well, how much money would you have at the end of a week, at the end of a month, at the end of 3 months, and at the end of a year? And of course, it's not long before they realize that it's not very long at all before they've become all billionaires. And so it becomes very exciting. And then they go home and of course try it on their parents, and you know, some catch on right away and say, no, no, I'm not going to sign this contract. And others sort of go ahead and sign the contract. But it's not long before they all realize that, you know, they can't afford to pay this kind of wage. But the kids get very excited and very caught up in the whole story of what they've become part of. And they become, you know, they never forget what exponential numbers are and how they grow.
Thank you, Tanis. Thank you, Kieran. For more information, please visit the Imaginative Education Research Group's website.